PW. Tamikaze, of course. What's going on, everyone? Oh, it's the Tamikaze. Let's do this. Tamikaze, don't tell me you're still holding that adder. You better not be holding that still. Is your PLTR going to be okay? Wait, when did you get into PLTR? And why? What's going on, guys? What's going on? This guy got into PLTR. Hold on, let me see why he got into PLTR. Okay, so I see a little bit why you got in there. That gap fill is still in sight. I can still see that. You might breach right into that gap fill. I can see that happening. So I see why you took that. Ah, damn, Tabakazi. I can't believe you did that. But I don't mind that. I think you'll be fine with that Palantir play. What's going on, guys? What's going on? Tesla needs to bleed tomorrow. I agree with that because my puts, that's not gonna be so nice. I actually got really lucky. So if you guys didn't catch that story yesterday, I actually bought Adder because of Tamakaze. The chart did look nice at the time, okay? And I'll actually pull up the chart real quick. So we can just kill that story right now. Let me get into probably the 1 hour. Yeah, it was about the 1 hour. So if you guys actually remember, I was actually looking and I was like, someone stopped me from getting into Adder on the small account. Master Wu, what's going on? Nice to see you. So I got into Adder with shares and everyone's like thinking I'm a little bit crazy. But then I ended up saying that my stop loss was going to be 1635, more or less. And so when I saw that this morning, I think that was around like 7 o'clock in the morning, and I was like, no, this is not the gap up that I expected. So I got out. I don't know when Tamakaze actually got out, but that was really bad. When I saw that just not hold, and the next thing I knew, it just dropped $2, and I was like, oh, I feel bad for who's still holding this. But as you see, it actually broke the support of the expanding wedge that I had. And so since I didn't get that gap up to that $18 mark, I was like, this is not going to fly. So I didn't like that it didn't hold that little after hours action yesterday. And so that's what I actually really got out. And I got lucky that I got out with only a $35 loss on that, holding 45 shares. So to hold 45 shares and only come out with a $35 loss, and then also adding to that with Airbnb also being that loss, which actually, if you believe it or not, and I'm gonna get into futures in a second, but believe it or not, Airbnb actually pulled out something similar to what Dash did, and I know Dougie was all over Dash. But if you notice, this is technically, you would say, is a bearish pattern. This is an ascending channel for the most part. And so we actually were right near resistance. And I was expecting this to, at worst case scenario, hit that resistance and then break down. That didn't end up happening. So I got out pretty lucky because it was only up $1 and close to $2, more or less. I got out with about $100 loss on that, if that be the case, when I was holding two contracts. But long story short, showing you Dash, which is my bigger picture, is that this was a rising wedge. And I probably pull out to the 4 hour, you get a better image. This is a rising wedge. Same case scenario, if you would have bought right near resistance, you were expecting it to hit the resistance and just break down. That didn't end up happening. That ended up breaking out of the bearish pattern. So that just goes to show you, I think it's just those two names particularly, because I haven't seen this happen very often. This is something a little bit rare that you end up getting that kind of bearish pattern ascending like that, and then you just break out of resistance and just keep mooning. Okay, so those are the two scenarios where I'm like, all right, I'm not playing any more bearish patterns with them. So I'll just wait for the resistance to break on those bearish patterns, and I'll just play the upside. So I saw Airbnb actually up about $5 towards after lunch, and I'm like, that's insanely crazy. But it is what it is. Moving on, let's get to S&P futures as we see that we're kind of green here right now. Let me get out to the daily so you get pretty much a clear picture of what's going on. we're still pretty much pushing right into resistance of the ascending channel that we broke down on, which was last week prior. So we're right near that resistance. And what's going to happen now is that as we're in this resistance, we're likely going to open somewhat green to flat tomorrow morning. And I'm expecting to get some kind of choppiness before some sort of retracement on this move. Because as we just moved 5 points on SPY, then another 5 points on SPY, you would expect to get some kind of retracement on this move up. And as you see, yes, we're pretty bearish in the sense that we broke the uptrend. We're just now retesting that uptrend as resistance for that ascending channel. And so now at some point here, you're now going to see that downward movement where we're going to see if it's just going to be a chop where we could just chop right along that resistance until some kind of news sends us downward. And likely, I would expect some kind of follow through from what the Feds had on that statement following their 2 day meeting. I don't think that it was all so good sentiment wise. I think there is going to be some more news that comes out, but just not yet. That's likely going to trigger that downside movement that we're not expecting. Okay. But again, tomorrow's going to be a little choppy. I would expect that we could end up getting a nice little red candle here, or it's just going to chop right along that resistance of that ascending channel. And then with Nasdaq Futures, which we're up about 12 points. Wow, very nice. You see that expanding, ascending, expanding a wedge. I'm still predicting a head and shoulders to occur here. And what I'm expecting is that we do have a little bit of upside movement. We're going to test that micro little head and shoulders that we had that caused that downward movement to test the support. So we do have that upside movement. The key level that I'm watching on Nasdaq is 15,389. That's the key level that I'm watching. So I'm going to watch to see if that's the level that we end up reaching, if we end up breaking above that level for whatever reason, or if that's the level that we actually do reject to get that downside movement of the retracement of all this bullishness that we just saw. Okay. So that's the big case scenario for that. Moving on, let me actually get to some of the actual action that actually happened today. And the one that actually stood out today was, of course, Tesla. Tesla was just insanely crazy with the flow that actually came out. When I saw that flow come out, I was like, this is insanely crazy. And the fact that we ended up having two Oracle puts that both came out insanely aggressive, that was just crazy. And I'm sure I can actually imagine Avery's face when he saw both of those Oracle alerts come out. He's just in shock at that moment in time. But bigger case scenario, I'm looking at this wedge as we made lower lows on every peak that we had. And as you see, you have that ascending little support level there. So I'm expecting to play out this wedge up, down, likely into next week. Now, I do have my support levels for tomorrow. I'm actually targeting just below 743 would be my level that I want to take profits tomorrow if we do end up breaking down on this. And then my last level, if we end up really bleeding tomorrow, and that would actually be dependent upon market conditions, would end up being 738. Now, to give you a picture of what the actual alerts were, to show you how aggressive they were, and that's what you really want to pay attention to when you see these alerts coming out, is what strikes are playing out and also what expiration. So if you actually saw the first Oracle alert that came out, it was a 700 put for October 1st. That's really aggressive because you're now talking about a $50 move out of the money and you're going 1 week expiration practically. Okay? So that's really aggressive. And then the next one was a 720 put and they went 2 weeks out. So when you see that type of aggression, they're expecting a really large movement. And as you are, again, you're next to resistance. And I'm hoping this doesn't pull some kind of dash or Airbnb where it just breaks resistance and it moves. I don't expect that type of move because I will blow a fit if that really does happen. I think it's just those two dumb tickers that ends up happening with. But we're likely going to end up hovering right around that the 755 mark, and then we're going to see this likely drop as I'm expecting with the entire market tomorrow with that choppiness tomorrow. Okay, if we end up do seeing blood, and I mean blood, tomorrow in the markets, then that 738 level will be realistic, and I will probably diamond hand that Tesla put that's in my small account. All right. So that was Tesla. The other play that came out this morning was also Nvidia. We had Nvidia. Those were actually a major flow that came out. If I'm not mistaken, they actually bought 210 calls in the money. And I'm actually going to just double check what they bought real quick. Let me just scroll up. All right, so what they did with the video was that they bought 210 calls in the money. And that cost a lot. Because if that stock is at 220, they bought $10 deep into the money, which is pretty crazy to buy that expensive. But they also did buy November expiration. So they gave themselves a lot of time. Now, I don't know if that timing, if they're just looking for a quick scalp on that play or they really plan to hold out to November because they're playing with fire. But what they basically did is they bought around 9:48 this morning. So 9:48 is they bought right around this breakout right here. And they actually saw, if I go down to the 1 minute, you'll probably see a better look of what they did. When this actually retraced and made a nice little cup and handle, if you want to say, it teetered right around that 221 mark. And actually, once it hit that massive candle and it took off right over that 221.61 level, that was just gone. And that was just money for that level. So you do want to fall on your TA. If I look at the 8-day EMA and the 21-day EMA, it actually held perfectly. And as you see, it was holding right where that level that it needed to break out. It held that 8-day EMA and it just teetered right along that 8-day EMA, just pushing. All right. So that was a beautiful one. Now, given the fact that they bought so deep in the money, that was a little bit concerning because I don't necessarily like to jump into a play that early in the morning when they bought so deep into the money. So that's something to keep in mind. Is it you love the 1 minute? Have you tried the 1 second? I'm sure that's something that you love. It has to be something you love. But I just wanted to get in depth to show you exactly what the breakout was that they were probably targeting on that one. Let's see what other one was actually very key that I wanted to look at. They also had Mastercard. Mastercard was a beast today, but that was a little bit unusual because they actually bought 300 calls, and that was around a $350 stock. So again, that's another one that it's okay. Okay, you bought $300 calls that's cost probably thousands of dollars, but the only good part is that they actually bought same week expiration on Mastercard. So on this one, they actually bought around 10:50, 10:42 this morning is when they bought. So they bought beautifully right on this breakout of what you would say is a intraday cup and handle right here. So you ended up retracing that little drop off where you went right below the 8-day EMA. You crossed right back above it and you just blew out a fat candle right there to the moon. And this just took off right along that 8-day EMA. If you're looking at the 3 minute, I think looking at the 5 minute gives you a better image. It gives you a better sense of confidence because actually you would have sold not even practically an entire day. It actually held right along that 8-day EMA. So that's something that you want to pay attention to. Is it holding a certain key level? Is it holding a certain EMA? And that would have been what you wanted to look at upon getting into that entry after that alert. Okay. So those were the two that really the three that stood out to me for the most part. Other than that, let me actually just check. I don't think Super Fortuna. Oh, well, we did have Super Fortuna. I did forget about that. We had PayPal with Super Fortuna. I didn't get into this one. I actually caught that alert a little bit late, and I did see it going straight up. And actually looking at this now, and I don't know why I had that here. Let me just delete this. As you see right now, I can see why it ran right into the resistance that I had, because I didn't even look at this one. It ran straight into the resistance. This was a beautiful little breakout right at this point. If you saw here where it gaps up, that was the break that you really wanted to look at. Once it broke above that 273.40-ish level, that was where that was money right there. So if I can zoom in, let's see intraday where this really took off and where this alert went off. It triggered exactly, Wow, at open. So if you got on in the top, you would have had to held that entire drop, which was about, you got in around 276 worst case scenario. You took about a $3, close enough to a $3 drop, but you would have ended up mooning regardless. So you had plenty of opportunity to make profits on that alert. So that was one that it was played out beautifully regardless of where you entered. All right. So the only thing I don't like about that now is that it looks like you've actually hit a resistance level. So if you're looking for an entry now at this point, I want to see it break over that resistance level that I have. If it breaks over that, then yeah, I wouldn't mind entering there. It's just that be mindful that yeah, now it's more of a higher risk because you just made this entire uptrend going straight up. And if it ends up breaking out, you're likely also going to get a retracement to support before that follow through. So keep that in mind. Other than that, what are you guys babbling about? They were buying. Yeah, today was a day where you just made all money. Today was literally a day where you just printed. It was hard not to make money. And speaking of a thought that actually just came into my mind, did anyone see that play that Avery had that he held overnight in Roku? That was insanity. And I know that we've been talking about Roku, and I'm sure you guys actually saw me on my recaps talking about Roku because Roku has been just teetering with that breakout. And I actually think last night I mentioned it. And I repeated that we ended up having the breakout. It was a bit of a consolidation right here. It looked a little bit like an inverse head and shoulder. If I probably have to dial into a smaller time frame, but this is the left shoulder. That peak made that head, and then you have that curl to the right shoulder. And that was just, I was not expecting a $9 move though. That I definitely did not expect on that morning gap up. That was insanely crazy. And my resistance levels were pretty much right in play, right up to about that 339 level. We hit close enough to the 340 level. Beautiful play if you had that one. I've been holding spreads on Roku since it broke that resistance. And then I ended up adding right down here when it had this little wick. I ended up adding some more spreads to that. I, PW, how'd you lose today? What did you do wrong? How do you lose on a day when everything just moons? Yeah, we got to talk about that. But besides that, Roku, as you saw, and I've been bragging about Roku for quite some time, that was a beautiful play. I actually had a lot of spreads that I've been holding for quite some time that I actually took a lot of profits on. I had APPS, that was one of the newsletter plays. I know Tamakaze actually alerted it from one of his breakout plays as well. That was just a beautiful one. And if I just show you guys pretty much what it's done so far, this was a beautiful little breakout right here. We had that nice retest early because of the volatility that we had earlier. And then we ended up just mooning, literally just mooning. It broke my target of 70 and it just took off. So at this point, I wouldn't even be surprised if we ended up hitting 80. It just all depends on how the market volatility, if we do get any market volatility, that will be the one thing that will probably hold it back. All right. So that was the one that I ended up taking profits on. The other one was CRM. When I woke up and I saw this, I was literally shocked. I was literally dumbfounded when I saw the move that this made this morning. Because, yeah, I saw the guidance that they came out with. They raised guidance. And if you guys remember from the newsletter, we were talking about this in the 255 range when that hit the newsletter last week. And then on top of that, we ended up having two alerts that hit on Super Fortuna. So you had multiple opportunities to get into this. The pattern was just beautiful and still intact. And that was a beautiful one. So when I saw that, I ended up taking profits on CRM today. I had a boatload of spreads on between CRM and Roku was probably my heaviest positions that I had with spreads. He played adder with you? Yeah, that's not good. See, you're a bad influence, Tamakaze. You and your squeeze plays. See, you even baited me into adder. I'm glad it only cost me $35. I'll send you my invoice later, don't worry. Other than that, let's see what other than CRM that I had. There was one more play that I ended up taking profits on. It was APPS, CRM, Roku, and I'm drawing a blank on one other play. Okay, this was my sleeper play. This was actually one that was on my Twitter. If you actually saw this play on Expedia, I posted this chart right when it hit this fat candle right here. and I got in right on that breakout. That was a beautiful move today on Expedia. This was a low key play. I don't think anybody would have even looked at it or paid attention to it, but this paid out heavily on Expedia. So I was not expecting that massive candle. I was expecting some kind of a small movement to about 162, and then we will get a nice little retracement. That didn't end up happening. That just took off straight to the moon, pointing straight up. And so that was the other one that I ended up taking profits on because I'm still expecting that retracement, and I want to lock in profits, being that I do think that the market's at resistance by morning here, and we're gonna be chopping a lot. Okay, those are the ones that I was paying attention to, and I ended up taking profits. Pretty much the morning time is when I wanted to take profits, and I got out pretty early on a lot of them. I got out early on CRM. I was kind of killing myself for getting out on that. One that I actually saw this afternoon as well was Costco. If you saw, they had earnings, and I saw this little wedge right here. I didn't know if I wanted to get into it or not. It looked bearish to me, and it was just surprising that it ended up popping. And so I did have my resistance level set here. Let me actually dial in on a smaller time frame. Probably give me a better idea of those resistance, and I don't like how that moved. My first resistance here was going to be 457, and then my next resistance here was 459. So I'm going to be looking at that one tomorrow. We'll see how that plays out, if there's any continuation on that move that it had today. Let me see. The other one that I had in play was Netflix. This was also a newsletter play, if you actually remember. I actually mentioned that this was going to be a 1 day wonder on Monday. I was expecting. I guess I was 2 days early on this, on that fat candle. Now that we've made such a move, I'm looking at a head and shoulders potentially. If you look at this, you have a little bit of a left shoulder right here. You have that peak that it made, and then now you're forming that right shoulder. So I'm expecting somewhat of a retracement. If you look also right here at the beginning of this falling wedge, you have almost a similar price action of where you have that left shoulder, you have that really tight peaked head, and then that right shoulder, in which we're kind of in that same formation at the top of that right shoulder, and then it just fades out. So pay attention to Netflix. If we do see the market starting to bleed out, that's going to be one that I will definitely want to short. Let me see, the other one that I was looking at was Shopify. Shopify has a nice expanding triangle here, and I'm looking at this trend line. I want to see if this is going to break this trend line. That will be beautiful for puts. If that ends up breaking that trend line, I'm looking at a target of 1457, and I will definitely be in puts because this will pay pretty fast on a 0 day also. Well, 0 day will either make you or break you, but if it breaks that trend line, 0 day will definitely play on this. Okay, so I'll look at that one, and besides the fact that 0 day will actually cost you the cheapest, especially for this ticker that costs you $1,000 to probably get an out of the money strike, I will take that definitely. Let me see what else was on my radar. I spoke about Expedia. AFRM was another one. I scalped this for like $2 this morning when I saw it just mooning because I didn't really get an advantage to play this at all. So if you saw it, it actually broke beautifully. It's been non-stop. It got a beautiful little retracement, but I was expecting more chop on that retracement, but that didn't happen. That ended up just mooning completely. So if we got in here, I got in right when it broke this line right here, and I can change the color now. So you'll see at what point I was looking. So you had a little bit of a, if you want to say it's a little bit of a choppy, I could say it's, I almost thought it was a double bottom, but it's not a double bottom. But once it broke that little resistance level right there, that's the level that I got in. I took that fat candle right up, and I took my profits and I was out. And if you saw what it did after that, I was kind of depressed by the end of the day. But profit is profit, and that was just a quick scalp that I took on AFRM. It was nice to see that it actually had a nice little retracement right into close as well. So I would expect more retracement, but with this stock, it's a little bit harder to say. And the level that I would actually look at for that retracement will be right around this level right here of that 120, 122, close enough to 122.39. Let me just double check real quick. Yeah, it's 122.39 will be that level where if it does end up giving back all those profits, it'll be that level that I want to see if it holds or if it ends up breaking down, in which that's not going to play out so well if it ends up breaking down because that would be a fat short. Okay. Let's see what other ticker there was. Did I highlight anything else? This is actually my play of the day for tomorrow. This is going to be my top watch tomorrow is Hood. And I know Avery has a little bit of a different perspective on this. He said if it breaks a certain level, he'll be here for it. But I do think that this is going to break out tomorrow. And I think it's going to be a fat move tomorrow. Targeting 49.85 on this. It's a nice little breakout from a descending channel. You had a beautiful little retest. You already had a nice move as it's trying to consolidate that move right now on this retracement. And I'm expecting this to complete this cup tomorrow. This is the play that this is the top of my watch list tomorrow. If this ends up playing out, then I will definitely be banking because I did end up taking 49 lottos on this at close. I wanted to get into it on the small account, but I pretty much ate up all my buying power with Tesla puts. So we'll see what it does tomorrow. I think they were about $20 a pop on those 49 calls, so I was like, why not? And so I'll see what that does. 49.85 is the target. I think once my calls do go into the money, I will likely take my profits though. But my target is 49.85, and so keep that one on your radar tomorrow. BA, I haven't really looked at BA since it broke that 220 level, and I was watching that 220 level pretty hard. Let me see if I get into probably a 30 minute will give me a better time frame here. Let's see if we have a nice little trend line. Can we hold a solid trend line here? Which I think it actually broke that trend line. See if it broke it or not. Get right up to the body of the candle, to the body of the candle, and it looks like we're actually holding a nice little support level. So if you notice, you're holding the body of this candle, you're holding the body and the wick right in the middle, and you're holding right up to the body of this candle. BA the worst to play? Actually, no, not really. Can you imagine that you missed an entire move from 209? That's about a $10 move that you just missed on BA. That's practically almost as nice as getting in on Netflix when it had an $18 move, or UPST when it made a $32 move. So BA actually looks pretty solid right now. Would I want to enter at this point in time? No, I wouldn't. I'm not after a $10 move. I wouldn't enter here. Is this a nice little double bottom also? It's close enough to say, but 220.40, 220.48. If it actually gets another body candle and it holds above this level of 221.30, then I can see a continuation happening tomorrow. But this is not a level that I would particularly like to enter, being up so high after a $10 move. Okay, so that would be what I would say for you on BA. Just watch for it to hold that trendline support. If it holds that, then you have a nice little uptrend that can continue there. Other than that, those were the moves that I was really watching. And I took a lot of profits today, actually, especially when you see the fact that we retested that ascending channel on futures. So I didn't like that. I don't want to hold into tomorrow with the spreads that I have, despite the fact that spreads are more safer. I don't want to hold into tomorrow with risk, knowing that okay, we're pretty much right near resistance on futures on the S&P. That's not the scenario that I want to be in right now at this point. So it's better to be safe than to be sorry. And so I did take a lot of profits. And as you saw, I went through all the names. UPST, PW, do not tell me you're trying to enter UPST right now after this entire move that it just made. And I haven't looked at UPST at all today, actually. And it actually moved over $12 yet again. After pushing $32, what is it, the day before yesterday? Was that the day before yesterday it actually pushed? Yeah, the day before yesterday, pushing $32. You got a nice little retracement. Looks about close enough to about a 50. Yeah, that's about a 50% retracement. And then just mooning another $12. Now, again, this is why I have the trend line is I wouldn't buy it up here now at this point. That's just, of course, there's momentum behind it, but I don't want to get in at the top. I would rather get in close enough to the trend line, or I would actually have to see if there's actually a pattern that's developing. Let's see if there's anything that's developing inside of here. The move that you really would have took was when it actually broke out right here. When it broke out right here, that was the level, if I was paying attention to it, which I didn't, that would have been the level that you wanted to get in on the breakup over that 325.50 level. And I can understand why that just completely just pushed. Now, if I'm looking for a continuation on UPST tomorrow, which I don't know if I particularly look at this tomorrow because I'm a little bit depressed about this one. But let me see if there's a level that I'm really looking at that stands out that it needs to break over. And let's see. See the level that it needs to break. Eh, I don't particularly like these wicks. Let me see if I can get into a smaller time frame. See a smaller time frame. Yeah, right around this level will be where it needs to break, which I doubt it will at this point in time. But it will need to get over that level right there, close enough to breaking over 339 for me to enter that for an intraday trade. Just watching, okay. All right, I like that. That was very smart of you to just say just watching. So I like that, but over that 339 level, 339, yeah, right around that break of 339 would be right around, yeah, it's a ballpark number. 339 would be that break in which we can see that continuation, although I don't expect it tomorrow. Okay. Other than that, that kind of wraps up our session tonight, guys. We'll see if there's any 0 day plays tomorrow. I'm sure Tamakaze and Avery have some lottery plays going on tomorrow. Other than that, I pretty much am holding that Tesla put. I'm holding some hood lotto plays tomorrow. And I'm kind of keeping it a little light going into tomorrow because I don't like exactly the spot of where the market is. We do need to digest the moves that we made this past 2, 3 days here because of how much we've actually pushed. But other than that, one thing I did want to mention aside from the Oracle on Tesla, and I believe there was also a major 4 alert, put alert as well, is that keep in mind this is something that you want to look at overall, especially on a day like today where, well, I would say the past 3 days where the market momentum is just pushing. Look for names when you see like Tesla just stalling. Look for the weakness because as you notice, Tesla actually usually pushes about double digits on the day, and we didn't haven't seen that yesterday or today. So that besides that Oracle alert coming out, I probably would have took puts on Tesla because when the market's pushing, you want to look for the relative weakness to short names. Vice versa, when the market is weak, you want to look for names that are holding strength, that relative strength. So I understand that Tesla or Oracle alert, but that's one thing I just want to point out. Probably would end up taking Tesla puts overnight because of the relative weakness that we saw as the market momentum has just been just mooning pretty much. Okay. Other than that, that calls it a night, guys. You guys have a good night and go watch some football. Okay. Have a good night. All right, guys.